everyone. So in today's video, I asked you guys on Instagram to ask me some questions about my first year teaching experience and just have an honest conversation, share some of the things that I kind of experienced my first year, some tips and advice for you. I've been trying to decide if I should do a separate video because so many of you guys asked a lot of questions that could be very helpful, that I could provide some advice on. So I might do a separate video, but I wanted to just answer your questions and reflect on this year. I'm been on summer break now and it's been awesome. So yeah, and if you guys aren't following me already on Instagram, go ahead and check that out. That way you can be a part of videos like this if I ever ask you guys to ask me some questions. So yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. All right, so the first question is, what were your positive experiences and negative experiences? Let's just start off with some positives. Positive experience was literally my coworkers at my school. Pretty much majority of our staff, like general education teachers, were like brand new teachers and we're all young in my age. So we had 13, I believe, general education teachers. And out of those 13, about 9 of us were new teachers, either our first or second year. And we were all young teachers who pretty much just graduated. And so that was like a great experience. I'm sure many of you guys are kind of like me, like that's a kind of a red flag, which it kind of was, honestly, once I got into it. But I will say that still was like a positive, because even though you're like, why is the turnover rate so high, it's like, okay, well, at least I'm going through this with people also in the same boat as me, and because we were all like on the same fields of being new teachers, we bonded a lot and we got really close. In general, majority of our staff was really close, and then I've met like literally some of my bestest friends through that. So I would say that has been such a positive experience, because I know those people will be in my life forever. And of course, like the relationships that I built with these students, like that last day of school, all of us crying, I just knew in that moment, like, as hard as the year was, we built something very special, and I did what I wanted to do with my class, which is build a strong classroom community and build strong relationships with these students. So of course, so that has been a positive experience. But with the negative experiences, I will say, like right off the bat, day one was like a shock to my system, because when I student taught, it was during COVID. So because right after I graduated with my bachelor's degree and did my student teaching, I went straight into grad school. So that whole year where students were slowly like transitioning back to school, I was getting my master's, and then I started my first year teaching. So when I was student teaching, we were virtual, then we went hybrid, and then we went full in person for like the last couple weeks while I was there. And while those students were even in person, the group that we had when I was student teaching 5th grade, they were so well behaved. Like behavior management really was not an issue. It was like pulling teeth to get these kids to participate and talk. Like the worst behavior issue we had was like maybe falling asleep in class and trying to chat with someone like while teaching. So that was like my impression of like what I assumed it would be, because of maybe post-COVID, or just because that's been my experience. Even observing classes, I hadn't seen any classroom management that wasn't well managed, I suppose. So when I jumped into the classroom my first day, literally waiting at the door, greeting kids, I thought they would be really nervous. But since the school I was at was so small, these kids have grown up together for years, so they're very comfortable with each other, and just greeting kids at the door, everyone's chit-chatting inside and just being super loud and like ready. I was like, oh, this is like not what I thought it was gonna be, of like having to crack the egg and like break the shell of them being shy and quiet and nervous the first day. It was complete opposite. And so my idea of like classroom management kind of like went out the window, and it was just a shock with like the behaviors of like disrespect, like talking back and not listening was a lot. And I like did not know how to handle it, especially as a brand new teacher. Like I thought I had all these tools. Like I'm very well educated in education. I went to school for 5 years for it. And so I was very confident going into it. But once you're like thrown in there, everything you know like literally goes out the window. And so that was definitely like the hardest experience, was trying to figure out my behavior management, especially in a school where that was not very outlined well for us. So we didn't really know how to navigate behaviors, especially since our whole staff was pretty much new. None of us like pretty much knew what we're doing, and I would say like the whole year. Like the whole year, it was like no one knew what was going on, and it was very challenging. And then I will say also, like, we have what's called is like PLCs, like once a week, and look over student data, which is what they're intended for, but not until like the end of this school year were we actually doing that. Well, I will say the first PLC meeting we had, I was like a deer in headlights. I had absolutely no idea what was going on, because while I was in my teaching program, I have never had to like build lessons from scratch. But again, since everyone was new, that's kind of what we're doing. And even our administration was new. It had only been her second year. So everything was like, everyone was just like learning as they went. Like normally you dive in and your team already has like plans and lessons that they've done, and then you kind of go in and either tweak them or, you know, you make them your own. That had been my experience in the past, but going into this and being with me and my teammate and my admin, and just being like, all right, this is the week, what are you going to teach next week, and having to come up with that from scratch when I had never like did that, or let alone have my literal boss be in the same room as me during that. And like, this is not how my creative juices flow, especially because I've never had this experience. Like even when I was student teaching, that is not what we did at all. We just like collaborated with our team, and we just said, all right, this is the lesson we're teaching, because all the lessons have already been done. So I had not really had that real life experience of building from scratch, which is very rare, because now at my new school, a lot of our lessons are already done. So we are tweaking things, making things our own, updating things, but the bulk of your stuff is done. So then when you go into those meetings, you're able to actually analyze student data instead of wasting time. So I will say that. One question says some most used items and regret purchases. I will definitely make a whole separate video on this, so keep a lookout on that. Someone asked, homework or no homework? My personal philosophy on homework is no homework. I've done some research on this in school and had a lot of discussions with it, and I've just, even with my own experiences, I've just like realized I'm team no homework, just because I think a lot of students who are able to get their homework done have some privileges of either having some parents or siblings at home to help them. And if a student doesn't really understand at school, when they get home, and if they don't have those supports like other students may have, notice like the playing field isn't really equal. And then if a student just does have help, and maybe they have a sibling who isn't actually helping them and just telling them the answers, then it's kind of like a pointless thing, because you're not actually seeing what they can do. Or of course they have access to calculators, online websites, and especially these kids are learning multiplication. Like that's really easy to look up and not show your work for. So that's something really easy to just look up and stuff. So between that, and then also I've had this strong belief of like, whilst kids are at school, they should be able to do school during those times, especially because our hours were from like 9 to 4, and the kids didn't get off till 4. By the time you get home, like it's late, and I think that time should be spent with your family and being outside, being a kid. And even if you do have a parent at home, I've had a teacher in high school who just like literally despised her kids having work, because she would be like, when I'm off with my kids, I just want to be able to spend time with them and not have to stress about getting their homework done and helping them, which really led me to have my own beliefs as well. So with all of that, I've always been no homework, but not against kids working and practicing at home, of course. Like I did encourage my kids at the end of the year, especially before testing, if they were able to go home and practice, and gave them some websites that they could go on. But again, even with websites, not every student has access to technology at home. So that's why not a requirement of homework person. It's just what has worked for me and what I've found through research and own experiences to be really beneficial. But anyway, yeah. One question asked, how did you contact parents throughout the year? What forms did you use and frequency? So I did a lot more phone calls in the beginning of that year to really make sure I'm building that trust, which I will recommend to everybody. Calling your families the first week of school, maybe the first or second week of school if you don't have as much time, and just reaching out to every student and leaving that positive phone call is like game changing, and you will just notice your relationships with families really start off on a positive foot. A lot of parents don't ever get called even if their student is doing really well. Oftentimes teachers will forget to call them because they're prioritizing students where their families do need to be contacted for more negative reasons, and then if students' families are getting contacted frequently for negative reasons, they often don't hear those positive phone calls. So leaving those positive phone calls the first week of school, I did that, and I really think it was extremely beneficial because I didn't have like pretty much any family conflict issues. All of my families were super supportive, and unlike a lot of my friends' classes, I know they had some struggles with parents, and I really believe that a lot of it came down to building that strong relationship with parents in the beginning of the school year. And then I also did class dojo throughout as the year went on. I feel like I did communicate a little bit more through class dojo, so I did that as well. And those were my main forms. And this year I'm gonna switch to, I think it's called talking points, which I've heard is kind of like a mesh over my 101 and class dojo 1. So I'm trying that out this next school year. So I'll let you guys know how I like that more. All right, next question is must-dos the summer before. So the summer before, this is like, it was really nice the summer before being able to prep all of your decor. It is extremely time consuming. So if you have a decor pack that you really want to do, printing that, laminating it, cutting, it takes a lot of work. So like I remember I had help and everything. So I would say do that during the summer while you're watching TV, you're relaxing on your couch. You could be drinking some wine with some friends, cutting all your stuff. So that was something that you should do. Also, just having an idea of what you want your procedures to be, which I know at my old school, we didn't really have any of that information kind of told to us until like right before we started. So again, deer in headlights, because I knew like basics, but like figure out how to teach procedures and routines that the school had embedded was not something that was known, so I wasn't able to kind of teach that. Like for example, even just the uniform policy, like whether students could wear out of dress code sweaters inside or outside the classroom, like it was like an issue throughout the whole year because we weren't given that information in the beginning. So it's hard to set that standard for the class if like that wasn't information that was kind of told. And especially if you're a teacher like me who doesn't really see the big deal with wearing a different colored sweater if you're cold inside. Like it was like a lot of kind of miscommunication with that a lot. So which normally, again, now at my new school, we were provided a lot of information right after the end of the school year. So that way now we have information moving forward of how we want to set up our procedures and routines. So I would either gather that from your school if your school does not provide that, and then of course create your own classroom procedures and routines. Because for example, if you create classroom procedures that have certain hand signals, your school might have one that they do like universally at that school that every teacher follows, which is kind of the case at my new school. I had different hand signals and stuff for different things, but at this new school, they're all different. Things like that, like figuring out first like what your school has in place, and then also creating your own that you want for your classroom. Definitely having all of that situated, and kind of also finding some first day of school activities, some first week fun activities that you want to do as well. I would say those are the main things to do over summer. And of course, I would say that's like the maximum, and the rest, enjoy yourself and just take some time for yourself over the summer, because as soon as the school year starts, you will have no time for yourself. And it is, I would say, very hard to get on track of prioritizing yourself, because when you're first in it, those first few weeks, it is overwhelming as heck. Next question was planning harder than you thought it would be compared to what you learned in college. Yes, because like I said, we started from scratch for like every planning. and it was like super overwhelming. Like luckily I had my teammate who, it was her second year, so she did have resources, and because she had already taught this grade level, she was a lot more experienced obviously, so she pretty much led all of our lessons. Again, I felt hard when because I of course wanted to contribute, but when I like didn't know how, it was challenging because I was like, I've never taught these standards before. I have no idea how to teach this standard. Like, how am I supposed to create a lesson if I don't even understand it myself? Like, you have to relearn, like reteach yourself everything to learn how to teach it then. So that was difficult, especially because like I don't know why, I have like vague memories of doing those like 20-page lesson plans that you do in college that everyone talks about. Like, I don't remember doing that. Like, I don't know why, because I think my senior year when we were online, we did it maybe for one or two classes, maybe once or twice we did like a 20-page lesson plan, but it was like with a partner. I'll be honest, I was so like checked out during virtual learning my senior year of college that I don't even like remember like doing all that, especially since me and my partner at the time separated it in chunks and didn't like create the 20-page lesson plan all at once. I can't remember that being very difficult because we didn't do it as often in that way that everyone talks about. So I would say it was definitely harder. But now I will say, being at my new school, having some experience teaching this grade level before, well, it is easier now, especially because like I said, my team has some lessons. So now if I'm trying to create or think of something, it's a lot easier to pull those resources that I've done this past year because I've already done it. I have a little bit of experience of what works, what doesn't work, and I know what resources to pull from. So I would say if you're starting from scratch, it's a little bit more difficult, but if you have experience, it gets easier. All right, I think I will answer one or two more questions because this video is getting a little long, but was teaching actually like what you were expecting? I will say no. And I will be honest, after this, my first week teaching, I had a breakdown that Friday after school. As soon as those students left, I just broke down in tears. And throughout this whole school year, I've cried so many times at work, on the night before going to work, on the way to work, once I get to school, during school, at lunch, when I leave work. Teaching has really put my mental health through the ringer, I will say, and it was just nothing like I could have imagined, which is hard to say because, like, again, when I was student teaching, I loved it, and it was just, this year was just so challenging, and which would always make me anxious because I knew that my class wasn't as challenging as most of the other classes in the building, and I still struggled like a lot because of the just lack of support and just experiencing it for the first time all at once, and like it felt like you're just like getting thrown into the ocean not knowing how to swim, and which was very hard for someone who had been so passionate about education, wanted to be a teacher my whole life, and also obviously being very experienced, having both a bachelor's and a master's degree in education. And it was just so hard. Like, nothing prepares you than when you're in that classroom the first day of school, no other adult, and you're the person in charge. It's a lot, and it was just, I was like speechless. And so there were some moments I really enjoyed, but overall I would say that the negatives outweighed the positives. Like, there were a lot more negative days than there were positive days, which I always thought it should be opposite. I felt like, of course you're gonna have some bad days, but like most of them are good. But it was opposite. It was like bad days constantly, and then some days were more positive than others. Ultimately, this is like the reason why I decided to leave my old school and switch to a different school, just because I'm like, is it this experience at this school, or is it the profession as a whole? Like, it's really hard to tell, but it is difficult when it's been your dream job and then it's just kind of like deteriorating you. So yeah, that's one thing, is it was like what I definitely did not imagine my first year teaching experience to be like. So yeah, but I will leave it there, and I will make another video answering the rest of your guys' questions and providing some more advice. Thank you guys for asking me these questions about my honest first year teaching experience. I want to be honest with you guys about my first year teaching experience. Lots of high highs and lots of low lows, and now I'm just excited to look forward to the future. And I hope next year is a better year for me. And yeah, so if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe down below if you haven't already. And I'll see you on my next video. Bye guys.